The HOA's new rule. The morning started like any other, until I saw the letter taped to my front gate. A big, bold header read, "Water Usage Compliance Notice." My stomach sank. I ripped it open and read the words that made my blood boil. Effective immediately. All private wells within the Maplewood HOA jurisdiction must be shut down for inspection and regulation. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per day. My well wasn't just a hobby, it was my lifeline. I had dug it 10 years ago when water rates skyrocketed. The HOA had nothing to do with it. But now, they wanted control. As I stood there fuming, Karen, the head of the HOA board, strutted up the sidewalk in her usual pastel blazer, clipboard in hand. "Good morning," she chirped. "Just checking that you got the notice. We'll be sending a team to cap your well by Friday." I clenched my fists. "You're not touching my well, Karen." Her smile tightened. "It's not personal. It's about community standards. We can't have everyone hoarding water like survivalists." I watched her march off, my jaw tight. Community standards? Yeah, right. The HOA had already banned my chickens, my solar panels, and even the color of my mailbox. But my well? That was too far. That night, I sat on my porch under the flickering light, thinking, if they wanted to take my well, they'd have to dig a lot deeper than they expected. I wasn't going to fight them with lawyers or letters. No, I had another idea. I grabbed my notepad and began sketching out a plan: rainwater collection tanks, gutters rerouted into barrels, filtration systems, and underground storage. By midnight, I had an idea so wild it made me laugh out loud. If the HOA wanted my well water, I'd make sure I didn't need it anymore. I'd build a rainwater empire. The next morning, I drove into town and bought every large water barrel, PVC pipe, and metal sheet I could find. The hardware store clerk raised an eyebrow. "Building a lake or something?" he joked. I smiled. "Something like that." By the time I got home, the HOA patrol car was already circling the street. They were watching me, but they had no idea what I was about to build behind that wooden fence. I wasn't just collecting rain. I was building freedom, one drop at a time. 2 days after I started building, the HOA struck back. It was barely 8 a.m. when I heard the rumble of a white pickup rolling up my driveway. On the door, in bold letters, "Maplewood HOA Environmental Inspection Unit." Karen had sent the cavalry. 2 men in neon vests stepped out, clipboards ready. One of them knocked on my door like he was the sheriff. "Sir, we're here to inspect your property for unauthorized water systems," he said in a tone that could strip paint. I grinned. "You mean my rainwater collectors? Go ahead and look. Everything's legal." They exchanged glances. I led them around back, where my newly built system gleamed under the sun, rows of blue barrels, PVC piping, and aluminum gutters channeling rainwater into a hidden underground tank. It looked like a sci-fi contraption, something between a mad scientist's project and a survivalist's dream. The inspectors walked around, muttering. One of them took pictures. "Doesn't this violate HOA design standards?" he asked. I shrugged. "Show me where it says I can't collect rain." They flipped through their binder, but came up empty. I smiled wider. That's what I thought. When they left, I could already imagine Karen's face when she saw their report. Sure enough, that evening she stormed over, phone in hand. "Do you think you're clever?" She snapped. "You can't just build some massive water system without approval." "Oh, but I can," I replied calmly. "The HOA doesn't own the sky, Karen." Her face turned red. "We'll see about that." Over the next few days, the HOA sent letters, warnings, and even a cease and desist order. But none of it stuck, because legally, rainwater wasn't regulated under HOA authority. While they wasted time with paperwork, I kept expanding. I added filtration units, overflow tanks, and even a pump that connected to my garden's irrigation. Neighbors started noticing, first out of curiosity, then out of admiration. "You mean you don't pay for water anymore?" one asked. "Nope," I said proudly. "Just a little rain and a lot of persistence." By week's end, 3 other homeowners had started building small collection systems. The HOA's worst nightmare was happening. I'd started a trend. Karen called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, but I could hear her voice echoing through the community hall that night. "If we let him do this, everyone will follow. We'll lose control of water management." Too late. The revolution had already begun. I sat on my porch, sipping cold lemonade, watching the first storm clouds roll in. My barrels stood ready, lined like soldiers. As the first raindrops hit the tin roof, I smiled. They tried to take my well. Instead, they gave me an empire. The rain had barely stopped falling when the HOA unleashed their next attack. A thick envelope showed up in my mailbox. Stamped, urgent, compliance. Required. Inside was a 6-page letter, accusing me of unauthorized construction, visual disruption, and potential mosquito breeding hazards. Classic HOA overreach. They couldn't regulate the sky, so they were trying to strangle me with red tape. Karen even showed up during one of my morning checkups, standing there with that ever-present clipboard. "Your tanks violate community aesthetic standards," she said sharply. "They're unsightly." I smiled and leaned against the fence. "You mean effective?" She pursed her lips. "We've decided you'll need to remove them by Friday or face daily fines." I tilted my head. "You realize you're threatening me for collecting rainwater, right? You'll look ridiculous in court." Karen jabbed her pen toward me. "You think this is funny, but you're setting a dangerous precedent." She stormed off, muttering something about emergency enforcement. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, I sat in my garage with blueprints spread across the workbench. They thought they could outregulate me, but they didn't understand who they were dealing with. I wasn't just some homeowner. I was an engineer with a grudge. So I got creative. By the end of the week, I had camouflaged my tanks behind decorative wooden panels painted to match my house. I added flower boxes, lighting fixtures, and even fake vines that wrapped around the gutters. From the street, it looked like an eco-friendly garden display, Pinterest perfect. When the HOA's aesthetic compliance team came by, they couldn't find a single violation. I could almost hear Karen grinding her teeth from across the cul-de-sac. But she wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to find a new HOA policy draft posted online. All rainwater collection systems must be pre-approved by the board and meet visual, safety, and community standards. In other words, they were rewriting the rules just to stop me. I called an emergency neighborhood meeting in my driveway. Dozens of homeowners showed up, most tired of the HOA's constant meddling. I stood on a crate and spoke loud enough for the security cameras to hear. "They say we can't collect rain, can't dig wells, can't live free. But this is our neighborhood, not theirs." The crowd cheered. Even some of the older residents nodded along. Karen watched from her porch, clutching her phone, her face pale. She hadn't expected resistance, certainly not unity. That night, the HOA officially suspended all new water restrictions. Pending review. My rainwater empire stood strong, barrels gleaming in the moonlight. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to surrender. She was planning something, and I'd be ready. The night everything changed began with wind, hard, howling wind that rattled every fence and window in Maplewood. The storm hit without mercy. Sheets of rain pounded the rooftops. Thunder roared like cannon fire, and lightning flashed so bright it turned night into day. By 10 p.m., half the neighborhood had lost power. But my house stood ready. My rainwater system came alive, gutters roaring, pipes gurgling, and barrels filling to the brim. I ran from tank to tank, checking seals and valves. It was chaos, but it was working flawlessly. Every drop that fell from the sky was mine to keep. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Karen. "The HOA office is flooding. The storm drains are backed up. Do you have pumps?" I stared at the screen. After months of threats and fines, she was now asking me for help. Without hesitating, I grabbed my rainwater pump and sprinted across the street through the downpour. The HOA office was half submerged in muddy water, papers floating everywhere, and Karen stood outside in a yellow poncho, shouting orders into her phone. When she saw me, she froze. "You came?" "Yeah," I said, setting up my pump. "Let's save your precious HOA before it floats away." Together, we worked for hours, redirecting water, clearing debris, and running hoses into the storm drains. My rainwater empire turned into a rescue system. By dawn, the water level dropped, and the office was saved. Karen stood there, soaked and speechless. I didn't know your system could do all this." I shrugged. "That's what happens when you stop fighting nature and start working with it." She actually laughed, a real, tired laugh. Maybe we were wrong. Over the next week, something incredible happened. The HOA board quietly dropped every fine and regulation related to rainwater systems. In fact, they voted to approve a new eco-friendly initiative. encouraging residents to install collection tanks of their own. Suddenly, my illegal project became the neighborhood's most celebrated innovation. People asked for advice, and I helped everyone set up their systems. By the end of the month, Maplewood wasn't just another HOA community. It was a self-sustaining, water-smart neighborhood. One evening, as the sun set behind the rooftops, I stood on my porch watching the rain trickle into my tanks. Karen walked by, smiling for once instead of frowning. "You built more than a rainwater system," she said. "You built resilience." I smiled back. "Guess the HOA finally learned to let it rain." She laughed. "You win this round, Waterman." As thunder rolled gently in the distance, I looked over my shining network of barrels and tanks. The empire that started with defiance but ended in unity. Sometimes, fighting the system doesn't mean destroying it. Sometimes, it just takes one stubborn homeowner and a little rain.